Okay, so the next strategy that the report looks at is interleaving. And what I think it's really important to do here is actually discuss what we mean by interleaving, because there's lots of literature, blogs, etc., that's written on interleaving that I think miss what interleaving actually is. So interleaving, according to the report, is the mixing up of learning material, so examples, concepts, whatever it is, with other material which is slightly different, and also really importantly, and it's not on the screen, in one study session. So the example of interleaving giving in the report is the mixing up of different mathematical problems. So that would mean, for example, that if you're doing how to calculate the area, you don't just do how to calculate the area of one shape, lots of that, and then all of how to calculate the area of another shape, and then another shape. You actually learn and practice the different shapes one after the other. So can I calculate for a triangle, then a square, then a circle, etc., etc., and then you go back and you do the same shapes again. So not blocked practice and not blocked teaching, but interleaving. And I think that's really important, because previously, when I've read about interleaving, the examples that have been given are things like students revising and doing an hour of English, and then an hour of history, and then an hour of science. Now, that would not be considered to be interleaving, because those three things are not similar. What also wouldn't be interleaving is if you do a quiz and you've got a question on topic A, and then a question on topic B, and then a question on topic C, and then a question on topic D, but those four topics aren't related in any way. It's got to be material which students confuse. So, for example, when we teach interest rates and exchange rates in business studies, pupils confuse those two topics because they're both about money and they've both got the words rates in. Interleaving is where you mix up questions on exchange rates and interest rates, because those two things are similar. Interleaving would also be if you were looking at geography and you were looking at a glacier and an ice sheet and an ice field, because they have to be able to identify and define those three things. If you looked at all of them together, because they're similar and because students confuse them, that would be interleaving. But it wouldn't be interleaving if you had a question on a glacier and then a question on tectonic plates and then a question on natural hazards. So just to be really clear there, that when we are talking about interleaving, we're talking about the mixing up of content which is slightly different, and that it's done in one study session. And what we need to understand when we're doing interleaving, what helps us to understand that, is something called the discriminative contrast hypothesis. That states that interleaving is effective because it increases opportunities for pupils to compare and contrast examples, to discriminate between them. So what we basically see then is it's only interleaving if you can compare the two things or notice the differences between the two things. It's not interleaving if there's not actually anything to notice. So really important that we understand that, and that was highlighted by the report. And then we can use interleaving in different ways. We can use it in the initial teaching. So if I go back to that geography example, if you were teaching glaciers and ice sheets and ice fields, instead of teaching all about glaciers and then all about ice caps and then all about ice fields, you teach them concurrently. So you would look at a glacier, then you'd look at an ice cap, then you'd look at an ice sheet, and you'd mix that up. If we're talking about cells in science, you don't learn all about animal cells and all about plant cells and all about bacteria cells. You teach them concurrently. So you look at a bacteria cell, then an animal cell, then a plant cell, then a bacteria cell, etc., etc. So that's initial teaching. We can also use interleaving in our practice. So again, instead of, for example, practicing how to find the area of one shape then another, like I said, you mix them up. Same in PE. If you're doing shots in badminton, for example, you don't practice lots and lots of smashes and then lots and lots of drop shots and then lots and lots of drives. You would mix them up. So you practice one smash, then one drop shot, then one drive, and then you'd go again. And research has shown that interleaving can be effective for lots of different types of learning, but the report does highlight that the only classroom-based research has been done in mathematics. So really important that we do realise the limitations there, and we can probably see that interleaving wouldn't work where there isn't those similarities, where you've got really big topics maybe rather than lots of small little bits. And I just wanted to refer to this paper from Dunlosky here, Improving Students' Learning with Effective Learning Techniques. And that's because it chimes with another really important finding that the report highlights. It basically says that when we have got really challenging material, because interleaving is more challenging in itself, because you're learning a little bit about a one, or practicing one method, then another method, then another method, then going back again, that's more challenging than doing lots of one method and lots of another. If we've got maybe weaker learners, or if we don't have a very good background knowledge about the topic, or if we've got really challenging content, it might be more beneficial to use blocking first of all. So we might do block teaching and block practice, and then use interleaving later. So for example, you might learn all about how to find the area of one type of shape and practice that, then another type of shape and then practice that, and then you do some questions where they're all mixed together. Then you learn a new shape, you practice that, then you mix the three together. So again, that comes down to teachers' expertise, knowing their classes, the most tricky concepts, where interleaving should be used, but then where we want to leave interleaving until after initial teaching. Also, just note here, research has shown that interleaved retrieval practice is again really beneficial. So if you can identify those topics which students do confuse and which are similar, and you can do a retrieval tasks, which means they have to look at both of them at the same time, that's really beneficial for learning as well.